using a branch of mathematics known as game theory. So basically we will see why there are certain sex ratios in different species of animals, and in addition I will try to explain a curious phenomenon that is kind of paradoxical from biological standpoint. That is the phenomenon of altruism. Why do organisms sacrifice themselves occasionally to save other members of their species? Commonly seen phenomena in animals. So I will start with the famous example of prisoner's dilemma. Say there are two prisoners, two criminals, and they have been arrested. Now, they are taken to separate rooms and the police is trying to interrogate them. They have options. Either they can confess or they can't. If they cooperate with each other and they don't confess, then we will have the case of both cooperating. And since the police does not have enough evidence to implicate them, they will get 3 years off from their prison time. If one of them cooperates and the other one does not, the other one defects, that is the other one gives the information to the police, then the one that is cooperating will get 5 years off his prison time and the other one will get no time off his prison sentence. So, yeah, that will be this case. If player A defects and player B tries to cooperate with player A. Similarly, there is the case when B defects and A cooperates, and the case when both of them defect. So the question is, what is the best thing a player can do? What is the best thing a criminal can do in this situation? Ideally, you want this to player A wants that outcome on the lower left, and player B wants this outcome. But that cannot be done because you can only control your own actions. So if you see carefully, this is quite a simple situation. Player A has two options for each of player B's options. So if player B chooses to cooperate, player A has the options of cooperating or defecting. So if he cooperates, he will get 3 years of prison, and if he defects, he will get 5 years of prison. So the better option is to get 5 years of prison. So he will defect. However, if player B defects, then again, cooperating will get player A no time of prison, and defecting will get 1 year of prison. So here also the better option is to defect. So in both cases, player A should choose to defect, and the same goes for player B. So the logical outcome, if you have two rational players, is this one. Although a better outcome would have been both of them cooperating. So this is a typical example in game theory which is used to show why sometimes there can exist such situations where it is illogical to cooperate, where people cannot just go along together. So this thing is called a Nash equilibrium. For those of you that have seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, the main character was named John Nash. That's this guy. It's called an equilibrium because if either player changes his strategy unilaterally, he will suffer a loss. That's why if this situation is achieved, there is no initiative, no reason for anyone to change his strategy. Hence, it's an equilibrium position. Now I will take another game. This is the game of matching pennies. Say two people, me and you, are given 2 pennies, 2 coins. Now we have two situations. We can choose either side. If both of us chooses head, I get 1 rupee and you have to give it to me. So we have that situation. I get +1, you get -1. If both of us choose tails, the same happens. And if we choose different faces of the coin, then I give you 1 rupee. So now the question is, what is the best strategy? Or what is the Nash equilibrium in this case? So here, if you always choose heads, then I will also choose heads and get that. If you always choose tails, I will also choose tails and get this. So there is no one move that is optimum. There is no one such technique. what you ideally have to do is to fluctuate between the two, so that I cannot exploit your strategy. So the best thing you can do is to fluctuate in such a way that my result is not favored by either heads or tails. Because if you choose heads 80% of time and tails 20% of time, then what I will do is that I will choose heads at all times. Alright, so what you have to do is to make me impartial between choosing heads and tails, so that I do not have a single preference. So, say these are probabilities, probability of choosing heads and probability of choosing tails. So for me, if you choose it with this probability, if I choose P, if I choose heads, then the probability, or rather the probability for this player, the one whose actions are given at top. So the probability will be, the probability of the outcome will be minus 1 times P. He will have to give the rupee minus 1 times P times plus 1 times 1 minus P. He will gain the rupee 1 minus P times if he chooses heads at all times, and I am fluctuating like this. So is everyone able to follow? So if I am choosing heads with P probability and tails with 1 minus P, this is the outcome of choosing heads for that other player. And similarly, this is the outcome for choosing tails. And if the other player is impartial between these two, then these two should be equal. You solve this simple arithmetic, you get T is equal to 1 by 2. That is, I should choose heads and tails with 50% probability. So this is a case of mixed strategy Nash equilibria. In the previous case, there was a simple move to cooperate at all times, to defect at all times. Here we have two moves that we have to fluctuate between. So this is a mixed strategy Nash equilibria. Now I will take a more biological example. This is the game of hawk and dove. So in many cases we see in animal kingdom, organisms have to compete for resources, for food, for territory. So now we assume that organisms have two approaches for this situation. Either they can act like a hawk, that is the black thing, or the dove, that is the white bird. So a hawk is known for aggression. That means the organism will go for a proper combat, and a dove means the organism does not want the combat, it will just run away. So ideally, if two hawks meet, what will happen is that they will engage in combat. Now, one of them will win, one of them will lose. The one who wins will get a better outcome. But you have no idea which one is going to win. I am assuming that it's a more or less symmetric chance. So, take a case where winning means, say, plus 1 outcome and losing means minus 5. Because you are indulging in combat, you are getting injured and you are still losing, not getting the territory. So, on an average in two such outcomes, you will get plus 1 minus 5 by 2. So, you will get minus 2 outcomes if two hawks meet. If a hawk meets a dove, the dove runs away and the hawk gets the resources. So, hawk gets 2, dove gets 0. Similarly here, and if two doves meet, then they don't indulge in combat. Usually they go for some kind of ritualistic competition that is seen in animal kingdom, peacocks waving their feathers for attracting female and so on. So they don't get as badly injured as the hawks. So they get an outcome of plus 1 on an average. One of them wins, one of them loses, but the average outcome is this for multiple dove-dove confrontation. So I can ask the question, what is the best strategy? But that will not be a good question because usually animals don't know game theory. However, if you see the experimental results, their behavior is similar to a Nash equilibria, and there is a very good reason for that. The hawk strategy will be preferred by those organisms that have genes that say make them secrete more adrenaline. The dove strategy will be preferred by those that have different type of genes. Assume a population filled with hogs. In this population, if I put a single dove, or say there is some kind of genetic mutation and a dove arises, what this is going to do is that since there are only hogs, usually they meet this situation, and this dove is going to meet this situation because all of them are hogs. So it gets 0 payoff while the hogs get -2. 0 is better than -2. So what will happen is that this dove will be very successful and it will be capable of spreading its genes to the next generation. Since it gets better, it does not get injured as often, it gets better resources, it lives longer, so it has higher reproductive success and higher chances of transferring its genes. So what will happen in the next generation is that since this dove was successful in passing its genes, you will see more doves. Similarly, this will continue until an equilibrium is reached, where a dove does not do better than a hawk. Until then, the doves will keep on spreading. So, do you understand? Similarly, in a population filled with doves, usually this is the outcome that individuals will see. If I put a hawk there, he will get all the resources and the dove will get none. So in this situation, the hawk will be very successful. It will get all the resources and it will be able to breed. And now the next generation, since it contains the children of the previous hawk, the next generation will have more hawks since the genes will be transferred. So similarly, hawks are going to spread in the population until an equilibrium is reached. So the same thing that is called a Nash equilibrium game theory, in biology we call it an evolutionarily stable strategy. Stable because it's an equilibrium situation. What it means is that it's a strategy that if adopted by a given population, it cannot be invaded by any alternate strategy that is initially rare. So in this example, if we consider a population filled with hogs, a dove was able to spread its genes better than a different hog. So the dove genes were going to spread. Similarly, in a population filled with dove, a hog's genes are going to be spread. But in an equilibrium situation, an alternate strategy, a dove will not be able to do better than the situation that was present. So the new species, the new strategy is not going to be able to invade the present status quo. So that is called an evolutionarily stable strategy. Yeah. So similarly, you assign outcomes, and this is the probability that you get. So even though those animals don't know game theory, over the course of several generations, they will be playing something like this. It can mean two things: either there are 1/3 hawks and 2/3 doves, or a single organism acts 1/3 times like this and 2/3 times like that. It can be neither thing. So, is everyone following? Now I will define one more thing. It's the relatedness between individuals. Simply put, it's the idea that if I have particular genes, what is the probability that you have that gene too? So for instance, if a parent has a gene, what is the probability that the parent's offspring will also have that gene? It's 1/2 because of the nature of meiosis. Half the genes come from mother, half come from father. So the relatedness between a parent and offspring will be 1/2. Similarly, if you consider the case of siblings, this one. So, what are the probabilities that these two have a gene in common? So, if you consider just, first of all, the mother. If I have a particular gene, there is a 50% probability that it's present from my mother. It's present in my mother. Either I could have got it from my mother or from my father. So, 50% probability that I got it from my mother. And if this gene also has to be present in my sibling, that means this gene should also travel from my mother to the sibling. So it should be this and this. So the probabilities will get multiplied. So it will be 1/2 multiplied by 1/2, 1/4. Similarly, for the genes I inherited from my father, So it will be 1 by 2 into 1 by 2, 1 by 4. So a gene could be from here or from here. So the probabilities will get added 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2 is 1 by 4. Similarly, in the case of 1 by 4 plus 1 by 2 is 1 by 1 by 4 plus 1 by 4 is 1 by 2. Sorry for that. So similarly, in the case of cousins, if I got a gene, there is a 50% probability my parent has this gene. There is a 50% probability that my parent's sibling has that gene, and then 50% that his or her offspring has this gene. This and this and this, 1 by 2 into 1 by 2 into 1 by 2, 1 by 8. So cousins are related as 1 by 8, siblings as 1 by 2, and parents as 1 by 2. So using this, I can explain algorithm. This is known as Hamilton's rule. It is one of the most celebrated ideas in evolutionary biology. It's quite simple actually. Let me just use the previous slide. So actually, if I am in a situation where I can sacrifice myself to save these three, what will happen is that one set of my genes are getting destroyed. But in an ideal case, 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2. 3 by 2 sets of my genes are going to survive in the gene pool. So, even though one set is getting destroyed, 1.5 sets are going to remain. So, in that situation, even though I am sacrificing myself, it's better for my genes from an evolutionary standpoint than it would have been if I saved just myself. So, any gene that creates individuals who sacrifice themselves to save their parents and a sibling, that gene will be very successful in the gene pool. That gene will spread through the gene pool. Because I have one gene, but there are 3 by 2 such genes that are going to survive. So that is the basic idea behind Hamilton's rule. Relatedness multiplied by benefit to the recipient of algorithm, there is recipient of the Self-Plus Act, it has to be greater than the cost to the person sacrificing himself. In such a case, a gene that favors selflessness will be spread through the gene pool. So, yes, this kind of explains algorithm. So, everyone is able to understand that. Now I will talk about sex ratios. This is just a diagram showing the different relatedness between individuals. So the question is, why are most of the species having a 1:1 or nearly 1:1 sex ratio between males and females? In many species actually, the males don't even get the chance to reproduce very often. The males have to compete for females like in lions. Only the head of the pride gets the opportunity to reproduce. The other males will not get the opportunity. So the question is, if a parent somehow gets a gene, say a mother gets a gene that releases spermicide that kills the sperm containing the Y chromosome. So that mother will only produce daughters. So that mother will certainly have grandchildren. So will that gene be able to transmit itself through generations and fare better than a competing allele that does not produce such spermicide? So it might seem that producing just daughters is a better case here, because if you produce sons, you may not get grandchildren and the genes may not get passed on. But again, we have game theory. So imagine a population filled with females. So now what will happen is that if there are a few individuals that produce a son, they will be able to spread their genes very well, because the single male in a non-monogamous species will be able to fertilize different eggs, and he will be able to produce many grandchildren for his parents. On the other hand, a female will certainly get, a parent producing a female will get a grandchild, but not as many as a parent producing a son. So the genes for producing a son will be more successful than the genes for producing a daughter. So these genes again will spread through the population until an equilibrium is reached. So here is the simple relatedness, and the main idea is that the relatedness between these grandparents and grandchildren, it will be the same either you produce a son or a daughter. So the chances of getting your genes passed on is the same in case of a normal diploid species. Now, it's a little bit different in haploid diploid species. So I think most of you will know about haploid diploid species. The males are born from unfertilized eggs and are haploid in nature. The females are born from fertilized eggs and are diploid in nature. So what it does is that it completely changes the relatedness we have. So if I am a male, then if I am a male so all my genes are going to be transmitted to my daughter because I only have one single set of genes. I am a haploid. So my daughter is related as 1 to me, but only half of the genes present in the daughter are from me. So I am related as 0.5. Similarly, you can see for the mother the case is quite similar to a diploid case. So what it does, the main idea is the relatedness between siblings. So if we take the case of two sisters, this female could have got its gene from the father or the mother. There is a 50% probability that it's from the mother and 50% that it's from the father. So if this gene came from her mother, there is again a 50% probability that it is also present in her sister. So there is a 0.25, 1/4 times probability that this gene is present in all three of them. However, if a female got her genes from her father, there should be an arrow pointed from here to there saying 0.5. But anyways, so if she got her genes from her father, then her sister would have definitely got those genes because her father has only one set of genes. So the relatedness from here will be 0.5 into 1. So it is going to be 1/4 plus 1/2. So it will be 3/4 relatedness between sisters. However, in the case of a sister and a brother, the brother does not have a father. He is born from unfertilized eggs. So there is a 50% probability that she got her genes from her mother, and there is a 50% probability that those genes were in her brother. So it's only 0.25 times relatedness. So sisters are related as 0.75, while a brother is related as 0.25 to a sister. So sisters are, for a female, a sister is worth 3 times as much as a brother, genetically speaking. So again, the question is, in usually haplodiploid species, what is the case of social structure is that the reproductive female, the queen, does not really do much except of reproducing, and thus females are the workers. For instance, in honeybees and ants, so they do all the dirty work of the hive or the nest or whatever. So the question is, well, there are many questions. Will the female manipulate the sex ratio in such a manner that there are less brothers and more sisters? And if so, what will be the case of the Nash equilibrium? How many times more sisters than brothers? So, since a sister is worth 3 times as much as a brother, then what the brother has to do to cope with that is that it should produce 3 times as many offspring as a female. And that can only be done if on an average there are 3 times as many females as males. So the sex ratio should be 3 females for 1 male. And that was experimentally verified. It was done in the case of ants, not for honeybees. In honeybees the things are quite different. But anyways, but there is another catch here, that for a queen, for a female that's reproducing, both her daughter and her son are equally important, 0.5. So she will want the sex ratio to be 1:1, while the workers will want the sex ratio to be 3 females for 1 male. So since the workers are the ones controlling the nest, they are able to manipulate the sex ratio in such a manner that it's 3 females for 1 male. Usually the technique used is to destroy an excess of unfertilized eggs. However, there are certain cases where we see parasitism in the species, where the queen travels to a foreign nest, kills the queen over there and takes her place. So what is happening here is that the workers are not getting their genes transferred to the next generation, whatever they do, because their queen is dead. So what will happen here is that if the queen is able to develop such a technique that it can hide its eggs, say the eggs smell similar or look similar, then the workers will not be able to distinguish. In a normal case, what will happen is that even if one worker gene enables the worker to distinguish between these eggs, they are similar but they are not identical after all. So these workers will be very successful, more successful than the workers in the other nest. So in the other nest, they are not able to distinguish, so the sex ratio is 1:1. In this particular nest, the workers are able to distinguish and the sex ratio is 3:1. So evolutionary, these will be more successful than those that are not able to distinguish. So their genes will spread faster, and a few generations later you will see only individuals that are able to distinguish between these similar eggs. However, in the case of parasitism, the workers are not getting their genes passed on. So what will happen is that if the queen develops a technique, the workers will never be able to distinguish or never be able to develop such a technique to distinguish between such eggs. Even if a worker can distinguish, it will be left to that worker. That ability to distinguish is not getting passed on to the next generation. So there you will expect a 1:1 ratio, and that was verified in 2 different ant species. So this was basically all, and this was how some ideas from mathematics, just using game theory and probability, can explain some phenomena that are kind of counterintuitive in biology. So